"We're done here," she said, tossing the divorce papers onto the counter, her new boyfriend waiting outside in my truck. "You can keep your dignity." I didn't say a word, just picked up my keys, the same ones she forgot I still had, and walked out the front door without looking back. She thought that was the end. She had no idea. My name is Daniel Reed. I'm 41 years old, a structural engineer by trade and a husband by conviction, or at least I was. For over a decade, I built my life around her dreams, her comfort, her happiness. We bought that house together, on a quiet street with maple trees that turned gold in the fall, just like she always wanted. While she decorated the guest room talking about future kids, I spent weekends reinforcing the foundation, fixing the roof, upgrading every inch of that place so it would last forever, or at least as long as we did. I worked long hours, late nights, took contracts that meant months away from home, just to keep the mortgage paid, the vacations coming, the designer, kitchen upgrades rolling in. I missed out on beers with friends, poker nights, even my brother's wedding because the family needs stability. That's what I told myself. But here's the thing. Stability is a lie when one person is building it alone. And I didn't see that. Not until I came back early from an out-of-town project and saw a man I didn't recognize walking my dog in front of my house, wearing my Seahawks hoodie. That should have been the moment I knew. But I didn't. Not yet. I made excuses. Maybe a friend, maybe a neighbor helping out. But then came the distance. The late nights she couldn't explain, the phone always face down, the trips to visit her sister that didn't quite add up. And me? I kept showing up, kept fixing things around the house, kept believing in vows that apparently she had already rewritten without me. But what she forgot was that I still had the key. Not just to the house, but to everything she thought she could take from me. We weren't always like this. Back when we first met, I was just starting my career, working as a junior engineer, pulling 12-hour shifts at construction sites, coming home covered in dust but proud of what I was building. She was working at a local design studio, full of energy and plans. We met at a hardware store of all places. She needed advice on wall anchors for a shelving project. I gave her tips. She gave me her number. 2 weeks later, we were inseparable. In those early days, we didn't have much. We rented a small apartment above a pizza shop. Furniture was mostly Craigslist finds, and Friday nights meant frozen pizza and Netflix marathons. But we were happy, or so I thought. When I got promoted to lead engineer, it changed everything. More income meant we could finally buy a house, take proper vacations, upgrade the car. She always wanted that perfect home, the kind that looked straight out of a lifestyle magazine. And I was determined to give her exactly that. I spent weekends building custom shelves, installing a deck, planting her favorite hydrangeas along the walkway. Every nail I hammered, every wall I painted was for her, for us. Our friends always said we were the couple who made it, hardworking, committed, building something real. I believe that with everything in me. But here's the problem with building a life for two. It only works if both are still holding the blueprint, and somewhere along the way, she dropped hers. The signs weren't obvious at first. They never are. It started with small things, a missed dinner here, a girls' weekend there. Suddenly she was working late more often, texting with the phone tilted away from me, stepping outside to take calls that couldn't wait. I'd come home from a 10-hour shift and find the house cold, empty. Our dog, the one we adopted, together, sitting by the door waiting for someone who wasn't coming home anymore. Then there was the trip she took, supposedly to visit her sister in Portland. Except, she forgot to turn off her location sharing. I stared at that pin on the map for an hour. Spokane. Not Portland. A hotel. Not her sister's house. But I didn't confront her. Not then. That wasn't my style. I've always been the guy who believes in giving space, trusting the people you love to make the right choices. So I convinced myself it was nothing. That I was imagining things. That she was just stressed. But then, The changes became impossible to ignore. She started redecorating the house without me, selling off furniture we picked out together, replacing the photos in the hallway with abstract art that had no story, no soul. The biggest blow? The locks. One afternoon I came home early and my key didn't fit. She blamed it on getting the locks changed for security, but I knew better. That's when I realized I'd already been replaced. But what she didn't know was that she hadn't changed all the locks. I didn't yell, I didn't beg, I didn't even confront her. That's not how I handle things. Instead, I quietly packed a bag with just the essentials. My passport, a change of clothes, and most importantly, the documents she'd long forgotten existed. Deeds, bank statements, copies of every shared investment we ever made. All of it, stored neatly in a fireproof safe in the garage. She never bothered to ask about it because she assumed, like everything else, I'd just let it go. But I don't just let things go. I document. I prepare. The night I left, I sat in my truck parked down the street, staring at the house we once called home. Through the front window, I could see them, her and him, laughing over a bottle of wine at the dining table I built. With my own hands, I could have stormed in, made a scene, demanded answers, but I didn't. Instead, I pulled out my phone and logged into the security cameras I had installed years ago. Cameras she didn't know about because I'd set them up myself, tucked neatly behind the crown molding. I watched as they toasted, their little victory oblivious. She thought I'd left with nothing, but what she didn't know was that I'd left with everything I needed, and I knew. It was only a matter of time before the house she'd tried to build without me would come crashing down. 2 weeks later, I was sitting in a coffee shop on the other side of town when my phone buzzed. It was Ryan, a real estate investor I'd worked with years ago, back when I first started flipping properties on the side. "Still have that house in Maple Grove?" he asked casually. I smirked. "Technically, yes." What my ex didn't realize when she kicked me out was that my name was still on the deed. The refinancing paperwork she'd filed with her new boyfriend wasn't just incomplete, it was fraudulent. And thanks to my quiet little habit of keeping copies of everything, I had all the proof. Ryan made an offer. A cash deal, above market value, no inspections, fast close. While they were redecorating my house, planning their new life together, I was already negotiating the sale. By the time they'd realize what happened, it would be too late. I called my attorney, handed over the documents, and within days the wheels were in motion. But the real moment, the one I'd waited for, came when I walked up the driveway one last time, legal notice in hand, and knocked on the door. She answered, wearing my sweatshirt like it was hers. "Daniel?" she asked, her voice full of fake surprise. I handed her the envelope. "You've got 30 days to vacate." Her face went pale. You can't do this." I smiled, calm, collected. I already did. And just like that, the house, the life, the future she thought she'd stolen, all of it was mine again. The fallout was swift. By the time she and her new boyfriend realized what had happened, the house was already in escrow. The sale went through faster than either of them could process, and are all completely legal, all perfectly clean. She tried calling me. At first it was the usual. "We need to talk. This is a misunderstanding. Let's be adults about this." Then came the threats. "I'll get a lawyer. You can't just take the house," but she could scream all she wanted. The paperwork was airtight. My name was still on every document that mattered, and the fraudulent refinance attempt they tried to push through, that was now sitting on a detective's desk, her boyfriend, the one who paraded around in my clothes and drove my truck. Turns out, he had a few outstanding warrants. When they ran his name during the fraud investigation, he didn't walk out of that house in my hoodie. He walked out in handcuffs. She, on the other hand, was left scrambling. No house, no boyfriend, no backup plan. The neighborhood where she once flaunted her new life now watched as she packed, what little was hers into a U-Haul and drove off in silence. As for me, I didn't show up, didn't gloat, didn't even watch from down the street. Because the truth is, when you know you've already won, you don't need to be there to watch. The collapse, sometimes the sweetest victories, are the ones no one sees coming. It wasn't until weeks later that the full extent of her plan, or should I say their plan, came to light. A letter from the bank arrived at my new apartment, addressed to both of us. Curious, I opened it. It was confirmation of a loan application for the same house I had already sold. The signatures, both hers and his. Except mine was there too. At least it was supposed to be. But whoever forged it didn't know me well enough to get the middle initial right, or the angle of the R in my last name. I stared at that paper, letting it all sink in. They hadn't just kicked me out of my own home. They'd tried to bury me in debt for a property they thought I'd walk away from. And if I hadn't kept those original documents, those backups, those careful files stored off-site, they might have pulled it off. But they didn't count on one thing, that after years of building homes for other people, I'd learned the most important lesson of all: always know where the foundation is weakest. I turned everything over to the authorities. The forged documents, the surveillance footage from my hidden cameras, even text messages she accidentally left synced to our shared cloud account. The investigators moved fast: wire fraud, identity theft, conspiracy to commit mortgage fraud, charges stacked higher than the walls of the house they tried to steal. When the detective called to confirm the arrests, he chuckled and said, "Man, they really had no idea who they were messing with." I didn't laugh, because by then, I already knew. The only person who didn't was her. Until now. After everything, I didn't go back to that house. I didn't need to. Instead, I took the proceeds from the sale and bought a small cabin about an hour outside the city. Quiet, remote, surrounded by pine trees and the kind of stillness I hadn't realized I'd been craving for years. It wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about rebuilding something that no one could take from me. I started small, fixing up the place on weekends, chopping my own firewood, restoring an old pickup truck I found in a neighbor's barn. Work was different too. I left the corporate engineering firm behind and started consulting on my own terms, picking projects that aligned with my values, not just my paycheck. And for the first time in years, I woke up every day without the knot in my chest. No more walking on eggshells. No more coming home to silence. No more wondering what was happening behind my back. Friends who hadn't heard from me in months started calling, inviting me out, reconnecting over beers and late-night bonfires. One of them, Alex, offered me a contract to help design sustainable housing for veterans transitioning back to civilian life. I said yes before he even finished the pitch, because that's what this new chapter was about: building things that last, not just walls and roofs, but trust, integrity, purpose. And as I stood on the deck of that cabin one evening watching the sun dip below the ridge, I realized something. What they tried to destroy wasn't just my home, it was my identity. But here I was, standing taller than ever. A few months later, I got a call I never expected. It was from a major real estate development firm, one of the biggest in the region. They'd heard about how I'd handled the sale of my old house, the legal finesse, the strategic precision. "Daniel," the executive said, "we're assembling a team to lead a new urban housing project. It's complex, mixed-use spaces, sustainable design, a lot of moving parts. We want you to head the integration." I leaned back in my chair, letting the words sink in. For years, I'd been the guy working in the background, making things stable for others. Now, they wanted me to lead. I didn't say yes right away. Instead, I asked for the project specs, the financials, the contracts, and after a week of reviewing every detail, I called them back. "I'll do it," I said, "but on my terms." There was a pause on the other end of the line. What terms? No cutting corners, no burying risks, and no treating people like they're disposable. Another pause. Then, deal. I hung up, smiled, and poured myself a glass of bourbon. Because this wasn't about power for the sake of ego. It was about setting a new standard, and one they couldn't ignore. And the irony? They offered me everything, after someone else thought I wasn't worth anything. Funny how life works like that. Months later, I found myself walking through the very neighborhood I once called home, not as the man who was thrown out, but as the lead architect overseeing the integration of their new urban development project. Funny how things come full circle. I parked my truck across the street from what used to be our house. A for sale sign still sat crooked in the front yard. No offers, no new dreams being built there. Just silence and weeds pushing through the cracks I once sealed with my own hands. But I didn't linger. There was no satisfaction in seeing the place empty. Just a quiet acknowledgement that some structures aren't meant to stand forever. I walked into the new site office, a sleek building, all glass and steel, and greeted my new team with a nod. No bravado. No need to tell them how I got here, because real victory doesn't need an announcement, it just shows up. Calm, steady, prepared. And as I sat at the head of the conference table, reviewing blueprints and leading discussions, no one in that room knew the full story of how I'd gotten there, and that's exactly how I wanted it. Because while some people chase revenge with noise, I've learned the most powerful kind is silent. In the years that followed, I didn't just build projects, I built people. I made it a point to mentor every young architect and engineer who joined my team, the same way no one ever did for me when I was starting out. Not just about structural integrity or sustainable design, but about life, about resilience, about knowing your worth, even when others try to devalue it. One of my protégés, Sarah, once asked me, "How do you stay so calm when everything falls apart?" I smiled and said, "Because I know what it feels like to lose everything, and realize that the only thing that really matters is what you build after." Today, I teach workshops on ethical project management and serve on advisory boards for organizations helping veterans transition into civilian careers. Not because I need the recognition, but because I know what it's like to stand at the edge of everything you thought you were and choose to step forward anyway. That's my legacy now. Not the house I lost, but the lives I helped build. Funny thing about value, it doesn't need to be shouted, proven, or defended. It just stands. Over time, the people who doubted you, underestimated you, or tried to take everything from you, they fade. But what you've built, quietly, patiently, with integrity, remains. Always.